Ever tried growing an avocado from one of those pits you saved from your kitchen, only to watch it sit in water for months doing absolutely nothing? Or maybe it sprouted, grew a few leaves, and then just kind of stalled out and never really became a real tree? You are not alone. Avocados can be tricky, but once you understand what they actually need, they are one of the most rewarding trees you can grow. In this video, I am going to walk you through the complete process of growing an avocado tree from start to finish, whether you are starting from a pit or buying a nursery tree. We will cover planting, watering, feeding, pruning, and yes, actually getting fruit. Plus, stick around to the end, where I will show you a clever grafting trick that can turn even a pit-grown tree into a real producer. Let us get into it. So, avocados. There is something almost magical about the idea of growing your own, right? That creamy, rich fruit that costs $2 or $3 each at the grocery store, and you could potentially have dozens of them hanging right there in your backyard. The good news is that avocado trees are actually quite manageable once you understand their basic needs. They are not as fussy as people make them out to be. They just have a few non-negotiables that you have to respect. So let us start by understanding what we are working with here. The first thing you need to know is that not all avocados are created equal when it comes to growing them at home. There are three main types you will encounter. The most common one, and the one you probably have in your refrigerator right now, is the Hass avocado. Hass is a Guatemalan type, and it is the gold standard for flavor and that classic creamy texture we all love. The trees are relatively compact, which makes them great for home growers, and they are fairly cold tolerant as avocados go, handling temperatures down to about 28 to 32 degrees Fahrenheit for short periods once they are established. Then you have your Mexican types, which tend to have thinner skin and a more anise-like flavor. These are actually the most cold-hardy of the bunch, some handling temps down into the low 20s. And finally, you have West Indian types, which need true tropical conditions, really only suitable for zones 10B and warmer with no frost whatsoever. Now here is the reality check, and I want to be upfront with you about this. Avocado trees grow best in USDA zones 9 through 11. If you are in zone 8 or colder, you can absolutely still grow avocados, but you are going to be growing them in containers and bringing them indoors for winter. Or you are going to be treating them more as an ornamental houseplant than a fruit-producing tree. And that is perfectly fine. I know plenty of folks who grow beautiful avocado trees in pots on their patios in Zone 7 and just wheel them into the garage or a sunny room when frost threatens. You can definitely make it work. The other thing I want to mention up front is timing. If you are starting from a pit, you are looking at anywhere from 5 to 13 years before you see your first fruit, and even then there is no guarantee that fruit will taste like the avocado you originally ate. Avocados do not come true from seed. A pit from a Hass avocado will grow into a tree, but the fruit it produces could taste completely different, sometimes better, often worse, occasionally inedible. If you want reliable fruit that tastes like what you buy at the store, you really need to start with a grafted nursery tree. Those will typically fruit in 3 to 4 years. I will explain why this matters and how you can actually graft your own pit-grown tree later on, so keep watching for that. All right, let us talk about actually starting your avocado tree. You have two main options here, and I will walk you through both. The first option is starting from a pit, which is what most people try first, because, well, it is free and kind of fun. Here is how to do it properly. Take your pit and rinse off any remaining avocado flesh. You want it completely clean. Now figure out which end is up. The slightly pointier end is the top where the sprout will emerge, and the flatter, broader end is the bottom where the roots will come out. This is important because if you put it in upside down, you are going to have problems. The classic method is the toothpick and water glass approach. Take 3 or 4 toothpicks and insert them about halfway up the pit. angled slightly downward. These are going to act as a scaffold to suspend the pit over a glass or jar of water. You want the bottom inch or so of the pit submerged in water, with the top half exposed to air. Set this on a windowsill that gets bright, indirect light, not direct blazing sun, and then you wait. Change the water every few days to keep it fresh and prevent bacterial growth. In about 2 to 8 weeks, you should see the pit crack open and a root emerge from the bottom. Shortly after, a sprout will push up from the top. Now, here is what I have found works even better than the toothpick method, and it is actually simpler. Just plant the pit directly in a pot of moist potting soil. Bury it halfway, with the pointy end sticking up above the soil surface. Keep the soil consistently moist but not waterlogged, and put it somewhere warm. Around 70 degrees Fahrenheit is ideal. The germination rate is actually higher with this method in my experience because you are not dealing with the pit drying out or the water getting funky. It takes a little longer to see results because you cannot watch the root develop, but I find it produces a stronger seedling. Once your pit is sprouted and grown to about 6 inches tall, pinch off the top set of leaves. I know that sounds counterintuitive when you have been waiting weeks for growth, but trust me on this. Pinching encourages the plant to branch out rather than growing as a single spindly stem. When it grows back another 6 inches, pinch it again. This early training makes a huge difference in the structure of your eventual tree. Your second option for starting an avocado tree is buying a grafted nursery tree. And honestly, if your goal is to actually harvest avocados you can eat, this is the way to go. A grafted tree takes the rootstock of one avocado variety, usually chosen for disease resistance and vigor, and attaches a scion, which is a cutting, from a known productive variety like Hass or Fuerte or Bacon. The result is a tree that will produce fruit identical to the parent tree, and it will do it years sooner than a seedling. When you are shopping for a nursery tree, look for one that is at least 2 to 3 feet tall, with a healthy, well-developed root system. Check the graft union, that slightly swollen or scarred area near the base of the trunk where the two parts were joined. It should be fully healed over with no open wounds or oozing. Avoid trees that look root-bound with roots circling around inside the pot. And give the leaves a good look. You want deep green color with no brown tips or yellowing, which can indicate stress or nutrient problems. Now let us get that tree in the ground, or in a container if that is your situation. Site selection is critical with avocados, so let us talk about what they need. Avocados want full sun, at least 6 hours of direct sunlight per day, and ideally 8 or more. They also desperately need good drainage. This is probably the #1 killer of avocado trees, wet feet. Their roots are extremely susceptible to root rot, specifically a pathogen called Phytophthora, and if they sit in waterlogged soil, they will decline and die, sometimes very quickly. So you need to pick a spot where water drains away readily. If you have heavy clay soil that holds water, you have got some work to do before planting. Here is how I like to test drainage. Dig a hole about 1 foot deep and 1 foot wide, fill it with water, and let it drain completely. Then fill it again and time how long it takes to drain. If it drains within an hour or 2, you are in good shape. If it takes 12 hours or more, that is a problem. You are either going to need to amend heavily, plant on a mound, or consider a container instead. For in-ground planting, dig a hole that is about twice as wide as the root ball, but no deeper. You want the top of the root ball sitting slightly above the surrounding soil level, maybe an inch or 2 higher. This helps ensure water drains away from the trunk rather than pooling around it. Do not add compost or amendments to the hole itself. I know that seems like it would help, but research has shown that amending just the planting hole creates a kind of bathtub effect, where water collects in that nice loose soil and does not drain into the harder native soil around it. If your soil needs improving, amend the entire planting area broadly rather than just the hole. Gently remove the tree from its container and examine the roots. If they are circling around, use your fingers or a knife to score the root ball in a few places and tease the roots outward. This encourages them to grow out into the surrounding soil rather than continuing to circle. Set the tree in the hole. Make sure it is sitting at the right height and backfill with the native soil you removed. Water deeply to settle everything and eliminate air pockets. Do not tamp the soil down with your foot, because compaction is the enemy of good drainage. If you are growing in a container, and again, this is your only real option if you are in Zone 8 or colder, choose a pot that is at least 15 to 20 gallons to start. You can size up as the tree grows. Make sure it has excellent drainage holes in the bottom. Use a well-draining potting mix, not garden soil. I like to use a blend that is about half quality potting mix and half perlite or pumice to really ensure good drainage. Some growers add a bit of orchid bark or pine fines as well. The key is that when you water, it should flow right through and out the bottom within a few seconds. Container avocados will need more frequent watering than in-ground trees, and they will be more sensitive to temperature extremes. The roots in a pot can get much hotter or colder than roots insulated by the earth. A light-colored pot helps reflect heat in summer, and wrapping the pot with burlap or bubble wrap in winter adds some insulation. Now that your tree is planted, let us talk about one of the most important aspects of avocado care, and that is watering. Getting this right is honestly the difference between success and failure with these trees. Avocados have a somewhat contradictory relationship with water. They need consistent moisture, but they absolutely cannot tolerate soggy roots. Think of it like a wrung-out sponge. You want the soil to be moist throughout the root zone, but never waterlogged. The top inch or two of soil should be allowed to dry slightly between waterings. For a newly planted tree, you are going to water more frequently while it gets established. In warm weather, that might mean every 2 to 3 days for the first few weeks. Stick your finger into the soil about 2 inches deep. If it feels dry, water. If it still feels moist, wait another day. After the first month or so, you can start stretching the intervals. Established in-ground avocados in most climates do well with deep watering once or twice a week during the growing season. Less in winter when growth slows. When you water, water deeply. You want to saturate the entire root zone, not just wet the surface. A slow trickle from a hose for 15 to 20 minutes is better than a quick blast that runs off. For mature trees, the root zone extends out roughly to the drip line, which is the outer edge of the canopy, so you want to water that whole area, not just right at the trunk. In fact, keeping the trunk itself dry is a good practice because constant moisture against the bark can invite disease. One thing I have learned over the years is that avocados will tell you when they are unhappy with their watering. If the leaves start to cup or curl, that is usually a sign of underwatering. The tree is trying to reduce its surface area to conserve moisture. On the other hand, if you see yellowing leaves, especially older leaves lower on the tree, and they start dropping, that is often a sign of overwatering or poor drainage. The roots are suffocating and cannot take up nutrients properly. Brown, crispy leaf tips can indicate salt buildup from the water or fertilizer, which we will talk about more in the problem-solving section. Now let us talk about mulch, because this is one of the best things you can do for your avocado tree, and it ties directly into moisture management. Avocados are naturally forest understory trees in their native habitat. Their roots are shallow, and they are used to having a nice layer of leaf litter covering the soil. Mimicking that with mulch does several things. It keeps the soil temperature more consistent. It retains moisture, so you do not have to water as often. It suppresses weeds that would compete with your tree, and as it breaks down, it adds organic matter to the soil. I like to use coarse wood chips or shredded bark, applied in a layer about 3 to 4 inches deep. The key is to keep the mulch pulled back several inches from the trunk itself. You do not want mulch piled up against the bark because that holds moisture right where you do not want it and can lead to crown rot. Think of it like a donut shape around the tree, not a volcano. Extend the mulch out as far as you can, ideally to the drip line or beyond as the tree grows. For young trees, especially in hot climates, you also want to think about sun protection. This might sound strange for a tree that loves full sun, but young avocado bark is actually quite susceptible to sunburn. The trunk and main branches can get scorched by intense afternoon sun, especially in summer. You will see the bark crack and peel, and in severe cases it can girdle the tree. The solution is simple. You can paint the trunk and lower branches with a diluted white latex paint, about half paint and half water. This reflects the sunlight and keeps the bark from overheating. You can also wrap the trunk with a tree wrap or even use a shade cloth on the sunny side for the first year or two until the canopy fills in enough to shade its own trunk. All right, let us move on to feeding your avocado tree, because proper nutrition is essential for healthy growth and eventually fruit production. Avocados are moderate feeders. They are not as hungry as something like citrus, but they do need consistent nutrition, especially nitrogen, to support their growth. The most important thing to understand is that avocados are sensitive to salts. Many synthetic fertilizers are high in salts, and if you overdo it, you will see leaf tip burn and overall decline. So more is definitely not better here. For young trees in their first year, I recommend going easy on the fertilizer. The tree is focused on establishing its root system, and too much nitrogen can actually push leafy growth at the expense of root development. A light application of a balanced organic fertilizer in early spring and again in early summer is plenty. Look for something with an NPK ratio around 6:4:4 or similar, with micronutrients included. Once your tree is established, usually after the first year or two, you can step up the feeding program. I like to fertilize 3 to 4 times per year, starting in late winter or early spring when growth begins, then again in late spring, midsummer, and early fall. Back off on the nitrogen in late summer and fall because you do not want to push tender new growth right before cold weather arrives. Avocados have some specific micronutrient needs that are worth mentioning. Zinc deficiency is common and shows up as small, narrow leaves with mottled yellowing between the veins. Iron deficiency causes yellowing of new leaves while the veins stay green. If you are seeing these symptoms, a foliar spray of chelated micronutrients can help, or you can use a fertilizer specifically formulated for avocados that includes these trace elements. One thing I do every year is add a layer of compost under the mulch in late winter. This is not a heavy feeding, just an inch or two of good quality compost spread from the trunk out to the drip line. As it breaks down, it provides a slow, steady supply of nutrients and improves the soil biology. Avocados seem to really respond well to this, and it is almost impossible to overdo it with compost the way you can with synthetic fertilizers. By the way, if you are finding this helpful so far, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you do not miss future videos. All right, let us keep going. Now we need to talk about pruning and shaping your avocado tree, and this is something a lot of home growers neglect. Avocados can get big. In ideal conditions, they can reach 40 to 60 feet tall, which is way more tree than most of us want to deal with. Fortunately, they respond very well to pruning, and keeping your tree at a manageable size actually improves fruit production and makes harvesting so much easier. The best time to prune is in late winter or early spring, just before the new growth flush begins. Avoid heavy pruning in fall, because the cuts will not heal as quickly and you risk cold damage to exposed wood. Light maintenance pruning, like removing suckers or dead wood, can be done any time. For young trees, your goal is to establish a good structure. Remember earlier when I mentioned pinching the growing tip on seedlings? The same principle applies as the tree grows. You want to encourage branching rather than letting it shoot straight up. When a branch gets to about 2 feet long, you can tip it back by cutting just above a leaf node. This stimulates the buds below to break and grow into new branches, giving you a fuller, bushier tree. As your tree matures, focus on maintaining a height you can actually work with. I like to keep my avocado trees around 12 to 15 feet tall, which means I can harvest most of the fruit from a 6-foot ladder. To do this, you are going to cut back the tallest central leaders each year to an outward-facing branch at your target height. Do not be afraid to take out significant wood. Avocados are vigorous and will fill back in quickly. You also want to keep the interior of the tree somewhat open so that light and air can penetrate. Remove any branches that are crossing and rubbing against each other, any dead or diseased wood, and any suckers growing from the base of the trunk or from below the graft union if you have a grafted tree. Water sprouts, those vigorous vertical shoots that pop up on main branches, can be removed or headed back to maintain the shape you want. One pro tip for pruning avocados. After you make your cuts, it helps to seal the wounds with a pruning sealer or even just white latex paint. Avocado wood is soft, and the cuts can dry out and crack, or become entry points for disease. A quick dab of sealer helps the wound heal cleanly. Let us talk about some common problems you might run into and how to solve them, because even with the best care, things can go wrong. The number one killer of avocado trees, and I really cannot emphasize this enough, is root rot caused by the Phytophthora fungus. This pathogen thrives in wet, poorly drained soil, and once it gets established in your tree, it is very difficult to control. The symptoms are subtle at first. You might notice the tree just looks a little off. The leaves might be smaller than normal, a bit pale, maybe some yellowing. As it progresses, branches start to die. Back from the tips, leaves drop, and eventually you can lose the whole tree. Prevention is everything here. Good drainage, proper watering, and mulching go a long way. If you are in an area with heavy soil or high rainfall, consider planting on a raised mound to improve drainage around the roots. There are also rootstocks that have been bred for Phytophthora resistance, so if you are buying a nursery tree, ask about the rootstock variety. If you suspect root rot in an established tree, the first thing to do is cut back on watering and let the soil dry out more between irrigations. You can also apply a phosphonate fungicide as a foliar spray or trunk injection. This does not cure the disease, but it helps the tree fight it off. Sometimes trees can recover if you catch it early and correct the conditions that led to it. Sun scorch is another common issue, especially for young trees or trees that have been heavily pruned and suddenly have exposed bark. You will see the bark on the trunk or branches turn brown and crack, sometimes peeling away. As I mentioned earlier, painting exposed bark with diluted white latex paint prevents this. If you have already got sun damage, the tree will usually recover on its own as long as the damage is not too severe. Just protect it from further exposure while it heals. Avocados are relatively pest-free compared to a lot of fruit trees, but you might encounter a few issues. Persea mites and avocado thrips can cause bronzing and scarring on the leaves and fruit. They are usually more of a cosmetic problem than a serious threat. But if the infestation is heavy, you can treat with horticultural oil or insecticidal soap. Lace bugs can also be a problem in some areas, causing stippled, yellowing leaves. Same treatment applies. In some regions, the avocado lace bug or various boring beetles can be more serious. If you notice sawdust-like frass around holes in the trunk or branches, you may have a borer infestation. Prune out and destroy affected branches and keep your tree healthy and well watered, because stressed trees are more susceptible to borers. Leaf tip burn is something almost every avocado grower deals with at some point. The tips and edges of the leaves turn brown and crispy. This is usually caused by salt accumulation in the soil, either from your irrigation water, which in many areas contains dissolved salts, or from fertilizer. The solution is to leach the soil periodically by running a lot of water through it, maybe 2 to 3 times the normal amount, to wash the salts down below the root zone. Using organic fertilizers and compost instead of synthetic fertilizers also helps because they are lower in salts. Cold damage is a concern if you are pushing the limits of your hardiness zone. Young trees are especially vulnerable. If frost is forecast, you can protect your tree by covering it with frost cloth, hanging holiday lights in the canopy for a bit of warmth, and making sure the soil is moist, since wet soil holds heat better than dry. For container trees, simply move them to a protected location like a garage or covered patio. Established trees can handle brief dips below freezing, but a prolonged hard freeze will cause dieback. If your tree does get cold damaged, resist the urge to prune immediately. Wait until spring when new growth emerges so you can see exactly how much wood is dead and how much is still alive. All right, let us get to the part we have all been waiting for: harvesting your avocados. Here is something that surprises a lot of people. Avocados do not ripen on the tree. They mature on the tree, meaning they develop full size and oil content, but they stay hard. Ripening only happens after you pick them. This is actually a huge advantage because it means the tree acts like a natural storage unit. You can leave mature fruit hanging on the tree for weeks or even months and pick them as you need them. So how do you know when an avocado is mature and ready to pick? For Hass avocados, the skin color shifts from green to a darker purplish black as they mature. But color alone is not always reliable, especially for green-skinned varieties. The best test is to pick one and see if it ripens properly. A mature avocado will ripen at room temperature in about 5 to 7 days. If you pick one and it shrivels up, turns rubbery, or refuses to soften, it was not mature yet. Give the remaining fruit on the tree another few weeks and try again. Once you know the timing for your specific tree and climate, you will get a feel for when the fruit is ready. For most varieties, avocados are mature anywhere from 6 to 18 months after flowering, depending on the type. Hass typically matures in late winter through summer. The fruit should feel heavy for its size and give just slightly when you apply gentle pressure near the stem end. When in doubt, pick a few test fruits from different parts of the tree over the course of a few weeks until you dial in the right harvest window. To pick an avocado, use a twisting motion to snap the stem, or use pruning shears to cut the stem about 1/4 inch above the fruit. Be gentle because avocados bruise easily, and those bruises will show up as dark spots once the fruit ripens. For fruit that is out of reach, you can use a pole picker with a basket attachment. Try to avoid letting them drop to the ground because even a short fall can cause internal damage. Once you have picked your avocados, you can speed up the ripening process by placing them in a paper bag with a banana or apple. These fruits give off ethylene gas, which triggers ripening. Check them daily because once they start to soften, they move quickly from perfect to overripe. You want them to yield to gentle pressure, but not feel mushy. Once ripe, you can store them in the refrigerator to slow things down, and buy yourself another 3 to 5 days. Now for that bonus tip I promised you at the beginning, and this one is a game changer if you have been growing a tree from a pit. Remember how I said that avocados do not come true from seed, so your pit-grown tree might produce fruit that tastes nothing like the avocado you originally ate? Well, here is how you can fix that. You can graft a scion from a known productive variety onto your pit-grown tree, and suddenly that tree becomes a reliable producer of delicious avocados. Grafting sounds intimidating, but it is actually pretty straightforward once you understand the basics. The best time to graft avocados is in spring when the tree is actively growing. You will need a sharp grafting knife, some grafting tape or parafilm, and a scion, which is a small cutting from the variety you want to grow. You can often get scion wood from a local avocado enthusiast, a grafting exchange, or even by mail order from specialty nurseries. The simplest technique for home growers is the cleft graft. You cut the rootstock, which is your pit-grown tree, straight across at a point where the stem is about pencil thickness. Then you make a vertical split down the center about an inch deep. Your scion should have 2 or 3 buds and be trimmed into a wedge shape at the bottom. You slide that wedge into the cleft so that the cambium layers, the green layer just under the bark, line up on at least one side. Then wrap the whole union tightly with grafting tape to hold it secure and keep it from drying out. Keep the grafted tree in a warm, humid spot out of direct sun for a few weeks while the graft takes. You should see new growth emerging from the scion within a month or so if it was successful. Once it is growing strongly, you can gradually expose it to more sun and eventually remove the tape. What this means is that pit you sprouted in your kitchen, the one everyone said would never produce good fruit, can actually become a productive Hass or Fort or bacon tree with a little grafting know-how. I think that is pretty amazing. So that is everything you need to know about growing an avocado tree from start to finish. If you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you do not miss future videos. And if you have any questions or tips of your own, I would love to hear them in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck with your avocado trees.